Developers seldom offer us reasons why we should accept a specific visual trend instead of the prevailing one. They might search for consumer attitudes, but these tell us nothing about why a particular color code, a vibe, or a tone feels right. Why does one design seem trustworthy, while another feel false, even when both are technically perfect? In branding, as in game design, color is never neutral. It's a signal of intent, a moral handshake between the creator and the player. Thus, when a studio chooses realistic or cartoon-like visuals, it's not just choosing a look, it's choosing fidelity or trust, a way of saying, you can count on our worldview. Just think about how we identify with the characters we can control. In a good game, the avatar isn't just a tool, it becomes an extension of the player's personality. The same thing happens with brands and their colors. These are symbolic tools that people can also use to express who they are or who they want to be. A brand, in this sense, can be a vehicle for self-expression and self-enhancement. When someone buys a brand, they're not only buying functionality, they're acquiring a set of meanings. Each brand carries personality traits, emotional tones, and moral associations. In opposition, the thing called chess is nothing over and above the rules that specify the movements of its pieces, its goals, and its constraints. In this sense, chess is a concept whose necessary and sufficient conditions are given by these constitutive rules. Because these rules define the very activity of chess, engaging with them provides intrinsic reward. Thus, chess has intrinsic value insofar as the pleasure of playing arises from interaction with its rule-based structure. However, from the standpoint of branding, if chess had been created by Rockstar Games, the game could acquire additional value generated by cultural associations and symbolic prestige. Value that lies outside of its core mechanics. In the late 2000s, game aesthetics were ruled by the dream of cinematic realism. Everything was covered in smoke and dust. Need for Speed Most Wanted, GTA 4, Far Cry 2, Call of Duty, you name it. It was a world defined by seriousness, moral grayness, camera shake, the illusion of authenticity. Games wanted to be real. Then came the technical leap. Engines matured, rendering stabilized, and photorealism was no longer the frontier. Once everyone could make realism lost its magic, so developers turned inward toward distinctive style. And color tone is at hand as the branding's native language. The yellow haze of past said war, dust, and realism. The neon gloss of today gaming says energy, connection, and play. What changed wasn't just the technology, it was the frame through which we interpret games. People often describe this new look as cartoonish. But it's not quite cartoon, not quite comic. Cartoon simplifies reality into symbols, comic dramatizes reality into myth. Modern games blend both. A hybrid space where violence looks like candy, and irony replaces tragedy. In this sense, the oversaturated polished worlds of today games are not aesthetic accidents. They are psychological instruments calibrated for optimism and readability. They exist to feel instantly graspable, an image language that communicates faster than story or dialogue ever could. And that's what makes it so close to branding. A brand, too, works by instant recognition, a palette, a tone, a feeling before meaning. The visual style of many social media sites, the corporate Memphis, became so popular because it perfectly solved a communication problem in the tech world. Companies needed a visual style that felt friendly, universal, and emotionally safe while being cheap, scalable, and instantly recognizable. The visual style of current game industry, with its bright colors, simplified forms, exaggerated proportions, and accessible, almost cartoon-like character designs, can be understood as operating with intentions similar to this. Both aesthetics rely on playful geometry and a deliberately non-realistic, friendly visual language that lowers emotional risk and broadens audience appeal. Like corporate Memphis illustrations, Fortnite's art direction aims for inclusivity, approachability, and universality. Characters are stylized rather than hyper-specific, violence is abstracted rather than graphic, and the world feels energetic rather than threatening. This makes the game welcoming of players many ages, backgrounds, and cultures, just as corporate Memphis makes tech platforms feel open, neutral, and human-centered. People often create personal identities by relating these colorful characteristics of brands. In the so-called person-brand connections, gamers and players build a personality that incorporates properties of brands and come to merge their and the brand identity to different degrees. Thus, not only are brands symbolic objects with personality traits, but they also become part of our personality under certain conditions. Gamers can characterize brands as having human-like personality traits like sincerity, competence, excitement, sophistication. Brands, according to their association with specific personality traits, are in fact helping consumers express their ideal selves. This is why using certain products can change how we feel about ourselves. For example, we may perceive ourselves as more good-looking after playing with our favorite hero. Carrying a luxury label can make someone feel more confident. Using a high-tech gadget can make them feel competent and forward-thinking. By using brand resources, perspectives and characteristics in their personalities, people enhance their ability to accomplish their goals. Ubisoft is a partner in historical exploration, and Epic Games partner in identity construction through cultural references. When these connections form between multiple people around a shared brand communities emerge. A similar case appears in GTA Online. The game's internal mechanics do not fully specify the properties of purchasable cars, for example their precise speed, acceleration, or handling. Instead, players must gather community sources to understand the vehicle's real capabilities. This creates an additional layer of value, where the meaning, desirability, and status of an item depends not only on the game's intrinsic mechanics, but also on the information networks surrounding the game. Color is the first language of branding, and branding itself is best understood as a promise. The palette of the title screen, the saturation of a skybox, the chromatic tone of the character's armor. These visual cues do something far deeper than decoration. They signal a promise about the world you are about to enter. A brand, according to the theory, is not merely a collection of consumer associations or attitudes, as traditional marketing models suggested. It is a system of normatively binding expectations, a moral contract between creator and audience. In the same way that a player trusts a game world to maintain internal coherence, users trust brands to sustain a consistent identity. When that changes abruptly, for example, a game studio radically shifts its color scheme, aesthetic, or symbolic register, the audience's sense of trust may fade or fracture. In marketing psychology, brands were long treated as collections of mental associations. Rockstar associated with cinematic spectacle and social provocation, Bethesda associated with expansive open worlds and player freedom. These were mere constellation of ideas in the mind of the consumer. Products operate similarly at this level. In general, Doom associated with aggression and velocity through red heavy contrast and rhythmic lightning. Cyberpunk 2077 communicates through saturated blues, pinks and yellows. A chromatic overload connotes digital decay, overstimulation, and the fantasy of self-modification. No Man's Sky relies on candy-bright sci-fi colors, turquoise skies, fuchsia grass, orange atmospheres, to communicate wonder, infinite possibility, and a chill-like sense of cosmic exploration. Yet this traditional association-based model of meaning has a critical flaw. It cannot explain moral reactions. Why do players feel betrayed when a beloved franchise changes its tone or color palette? Why does a neon-saturated sequel to a previously muted series provoke outrage, not just surprise? When a studio builds a recognizable identity through its products over time, it is not merely shaping perception. It is forming binding expectations. If you deliberately lead someone to believe you will act in a certain way, and you know they rely on that, you are bound by it. Every act of branding, including aesthetic design, therefore carries ethical weight. When a studio repeatedly uses cool contemplative tones, it is assuring its community of a particular experiential mood, perhaps one of minimalism or meditative distance. To suddenly replace that aesthetic with garish color effects or cynical humor is not simply a new artistic direction. It feels like a broken promise. This is the promise embedded in its visual and mechanical language, a ritualized contract of color, rhythm, and moral atmosphere. A cheerful pastel Souls-like will not just confuse, it will violate the implicit trust that underpins the player-developer relationship. Once repeated across titles, trailers, and community events, these colors acquire ethical density. They come to mean trustworthiness, seriousness, or rebellion. With GTA 4, Rockstar made a quiet promise to its audience. The muted colors, the slow pacing, the moral heaviness of the story all signaled that this was not just irony, but a reflective, almost melancholic take on modern life. When GTA 5 arrived, and especially as GTA Online evolved, that aesthetic contract shifted. The world became brighter, louder, more ironic, a playground of excess. For many players, this didn't feel like creative evolution, so much as a broken promise. For video game design, the ethical insight is clear. Brand identity is a commitment. It is a living promise made through color, tone, and interface, one that players will hold you to. If you wish to alter the aesthetic contract, you can seek implicit consent by gradually testing new palettes on players, or provide fair notice by framing the visual shift as an intentional and reasonable evolution, not an arbitrary betrayal. Why was it important to tell you all this about the importance of branding? I will try to explain through an example. There's a way in which today video games look strikingly similar, but not in the way two modern artworks might look the same. For example, imagine two canvases, both painted red. One hangs in the museum, the other is clearly not. They are visually identical, and yet one is art, the other is not. That was the insight of the philosopher Arthur Danto. He argued that what makes something art isn't what you see, but the context that tells you how to see it. A museum, a title, a theory from the art school. These form what Danto called the art world, the invisible structure that gives the object its identity as art. The art world is the invisible structure that made art possible. Today, this role also belongs to branding. Brands are the interpretative atmosphere of our digital culture, the framework that tells us what kind of experience something is before we even press start. Now think about modern video games. They too often look the same. You could almost merge them into one glowing plastic trend. But they don't feel the same, not even close. The reason again isn't visual or game mechanic based. It's interpretative. Each game exists within its own brand world, its own ecosystem of meaning that tells us what we are really seeing. So while Fortnite and many contemporary mobile games share the same cartoon-like visual language of color and simplified form, their meanings differ radically. In the Fortnite case, the combination of visuals, gameplay, and branding has made it a cultural phenomenon. These widely used saturated visuals don't have a fixed meaning. In the brand world, the most successful game itself defines what they signify. Visually similar mobile games are often Fortnite-like, not the other way around. For Danto, nothing in a visible object itself makes it art. A red painting is visually indistinguishable from a red square. What changes is not the look, but the framework, our best theories, history, and institutional recognition. Theoretically, the same-looking thing can be a video game or not, depending on the branding that surrounds it. This is why two games can look alike, yet live entirely different lives. It's not just that games can share the same style. It is that one uses red color as tragedy, the other as parody. For a designer, this means thinking beyond appearance. Ask not only how will it look, but what world will this look belongs to? Because every texture, every filter, every color choice now arrives preloaded with cultural expectations. So perhaps the challenge for the next generation of game designers is not to make things look more different, but to make them mean differently.